This is SpaceTime Series 29, Episode 30, for broadcast on the 11th of March 2026. Coming up on SpaceTime, a solar superstorm hits the red planet, recent tectonic activity discovered on the Moon, and repair work underway on NASA's Artemis 2 manned moon rocket. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
Over the last few years, planet Earth's been slammed by a series of violent solar storms erupting from the Sun as our local star transitions through solar max, the climax of its 11-year solar cycle. When these solar flares and coronal mass ejections hit the Earth, they affect, damage and occasionally destroy spacecraft. They interfere with navigation systems, disrupt communications networks, and black out terrestrial power grids. But what happens when these same geomagnetic storms reach Mars? Now, thanks to the European Space Agency's Mars orbiters, we know, glitching spacecraft and supercharging the upper Martian atmosphere. Back in May 2024, the Earth was hit by one of the biggest solar storms in over 20 years. It sent our planet's atmosphere into overdrive, triggering shimmering auroras that were seen as far north as Sydney. But this storm also hit the red planet. Now, fortunately, ESA's two Mars orbiters, Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, were in the right place at the right time, with a radiation monitor aboard the Trace Gas Orbiter picking up a dose equivalent to some 200 normal days in just 64 hours. Now, a new study reported in the journal Nature Communications shows the impact was remarkable. The study's lead author Jacob Perrott from the European Space Agency says the upper Martian atmosphere was flooded by electrons in the event. Perrott described it as the biggest response in a solar storm ever seen at Mars. The superstorm caused a dramatic increase in electrons in two distinct layers of the red planet's atmosphere. These occurred at altitudes of around 110 and 130 kilometres, with numbers rising by 45% and a whopping 278% respectively, the most electrons ever seen in this layer of the Martian atmosphere. The storm also caused computer errors on board both spacecraft. That's a typical peril of space weather, as the particles involved are so energetic and hard to predict. To investigate the superstorm's impact on Mars, Perrott and colleagues used a technique known as radio occultation. First, Mars Express beamed a radio signal to Trace Gas Orbiter at the very moment it was disappearing over the Martian horizon. As Trace Gas Orbiter vanished, the radio signal was bent, that is refracted, by various layers in the Martian atmosphere, before being picked up by the orbiter, thereby allowing scientists to glean more about each layer. The researchers also used the observations from NASA's MAVEN mission to confirm the electron densities. Now, this technique's actually been used for decades to explore the solar system, but they always use signals beamed from a spacecraft to Earth, rather than between two spacecraft orbiting another world. The superstorm was experienced very differently at Earth and Mars, highlighting the differences between the two worlds. At Earth, the response of the upper atmosphere was more muted, thanks to the shielding provided by Earth's magnetic field. As well as deflecting a lot of solar storm particles away from the Earth, the planet's magnetic field also diverted some towards the Earth's poles, where they follow the planet's magnetic field lines, lighting up the skies with spectacular auroral activity. Now, while their differences can make it tricky to compare the two planets directly, understanding how solar activity impacts the residents of our solar system, in other words, space weather forecasting, is hugely important. At Earth, solar storms can be dangerous and damaging for astronauts and equipment in space. And as we mentioned earlier, they can disrupt both satellites and systems such as power, communications and navigation. However, studying space weather remains difficult as the Sun throws out radiation material erratically, making targeted measurements largely opportunistic. Fortunately, astronomers were able to use their occultation technique with Mars Express and Trace Gas Orbiter just 10 minutes after a large solar flare hit Mars. Now, at the time, they were only performing 2 observations per week at Mars, so the timing was extremely lucky. The authors captured the aftermath of 3 solar events, all part of the same solar storm, but different in terms of what they throw out into space and how they do it. one flare of radiation, one burst of high-energy particles, and an eruption of material known as a coronal mass ejection. Together, these events sent fast-moving energetic magnetized plasma and X-rays flooding towards Mars. When the barrage of materials hit the red planet's upper atmosphere, it collided with neutral atoms, stripping away their electrons, causing the region to fill up with charged particles. The results improved science's understanding of Mars by revealing how solar storms deposit energy and particles into the Martian atmosphere. Important, as we already know the planet's lost huge amounts of water and most of its atmosphere to space, most likely driven by the continual stream of particles flowing out from the sun and the solar wind, eroding the Martian atmosphere in the process. But there's another side to it. The structure and contents of the planet's atmosphere influence how radio signals travel through space. If the Martian upper atmosphere is packed full of electrons, that could block signals used to explore the planet's surface by radar, making this a key consideration for mission planning and impacting science's ability to investigate other worlds. This is space-time. Still to come, the detection of recent tectonic activity on the Moon, and works continuing to repair NASA's Artemis 2 manned mission to the Moon in preparation for what hopefully will be a launch next month. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. Scientists have produced the first global map and analysis of small mare ridges seen on the surface of the Moon. The findings, reported in the Planetary Science Journal, suggest that tectonic activity is continuing across the lunar surface right up to this day. They show for the first time that small mare ridges are geologically young and widespread across the lunar mare, the vast dark plains on the Moon's surface. The author's discovery of how small mare ridges form introduces a new set of potential moonquake sources that could affect future site selections for lunar landings. Both the Moon and the Earth are tectonically active. However, the tectonic forces affecting each body are very different. Earth's crust is divided into tectonic plates that have converged, separated and slid past one another to produce expansive mountain ridges, deep ocean trenches and rings of volcanoes around places like the Pacific Ocean. Now, the Moon's crust isn't divided into tectonic plates, yet stresses within the lunar crust give rise to several distinctive landforms. One of the most common of these are lobate scarps. These form when the crust compresses and the resulting forces push material up and over adjacent crust along a fault, creating a ridge. These scarps, found in the lunar highlands, have formed only within the last billion years or so, in other words, the last 20% of the Moon's history. Back in 2010, scientists confirmed that as it continues to cool, the Moon is slowly shrinking. And it's this contraction which caused the lobate scarps on the lunar highlands to form in the first place. Yet the formation of lobate scarps doesn't account for all the recent contractural landforms seen on the Moon. Another recently identified class of tectonic landforms are small mare ridges. Small mare ridges are caused by the same forces that form lobate scarps. But while lobate scarps are found in the highlands, small mare ridges are found only in the mare. The authors sought to map out small mare ridges in the lunar mare and analyse their connection to recent tectonic activity. The study's lead author, Kolna Peva from the Centre for Earth and Planetary Studies, says that since the Apollo era, scientists have known about the prevalence of lobate scarps throughout the lunar highlands. But this is the first time scientists have documented the widespread prevalence of similar features throughout the lunar mare. The work helps gain a global perspective of recent lunar tectonic activity on the Moon, and that'll lead to a greater understanding of its interior and its thermal and seismic history, as well as the potential for future moonquakes. The authors compiled an extensive small mare ridges catalogue, discovering some 1,114 new small mare ridges segments across the lunar near-side mare. That increases the total number of known small mare ridges across the Moon to 2,634. They also determined that the average small mare ridge was around 124 million years old, consistent with the average age of lobate scarps at 105 million years. These ages suggest that, like lobate scarps, small mare ridges are among the youngest geological features on the Moon. Finally, the analysis shows that small mare ridges form through the same type of faults as lobate scarps, and that lobate scarps in the highlands often transition to small mare ridges in the mare, further suggesting a similar origin for both these kinds of structures. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, work continues to repair NASA's Artemis 2 rocket in preparation for a possible April manned mission around the moon. And later in the science report, a new study warns that kids who consume ultra-processed foods are also more likely to have issues with behaviour and emotions. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. Work's continuing on repairs to NASA's Artemis 2 manned moon mission rocket in the Vehicle Assembly Building at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Technicians have now accessed the launch vehicle stage adapter to inspect the components that had prevented helium from flowing to the upper stage in the wake of last month's second wet dress rehearsal. Engineers have now determined a seal in the quick disconnect through which helium flows from the ground support systems into the rocket was obstructing the pathway. The team removed the quick disconnect, reassembled the system, and began validating the repairs to the upper stage by running a reduced flow rate of helium through the mechanism in order to ensure the issue was resolved. Engineers are now trying to determine exactly what allowed the seal to become dislodged in the first place in order to make sure it doesn't happen again. While the upper stage repair has been underway, technicians have also been working to refresh other systems on the 98-metre tall rocket. They're activating a new set of flight termination system batteries ahead of end-to-end retesting of the system and are also replacing the flight batteries on the upper stage, the core stage and the solid rocket boosters. And they're recharging Orion's launch abort system batteries as well. Work's also been carried out to replace a seal on a core stage liquid oxygen line feed system. Once complete, engineers will reassemble the oxygen tail service mast umbilical plate and perform a number of integrity tests to ensure the seal interface is tight. Work on the rocket and the spacecraft will continue over the next few weeks, before a second vehicle rollout takes place towards the end of the month and a launch attempt possibly in April. The Artemis 2 mission will carry a crew of 4 on a 10-day journey around the moon and back to Earth. It'll be the first time humans have travelled to the moon in more than 50 years. Now, from the crew's point of view, other than flying the ship and doing the science, food will be an important part of the mission. The food flying aboard Artemis 2 has been specifically designed to support crew health and performance. Unlike the International Space Station, there's no resupply, no refrigeration, and no late load capacity. So all meals need to be carefully selected to remain safe, shelf-stable, and easy to prepare and consume inside the Orion spacecraft. Food selections are developed in coordination with space food experts and the crew to ensure balanced calorie needs, hydration, nutrient intake, and accommodating individual crew preferences. Food selection for Artemis 2 also needs to consider its ability to be prepared using Orion's onboard systems, the available space, and the power requirements. So food must be easy to prepare and consume in microgravity. Now, on a typical mission day, excluding launch and re-entry, astronauts have scheduled time for breakfast, lunch and dinner. Each astronaut's also allotted 2 flavoured beverages a day. That may include coffee. However, beverage options are limited due to Art mass constraints, which restrict how much food and drink can be carried on board. Fresh foods will not be flying on Artemis 2 because Orion doesn't have refrigeration, nor the late load capacity required for fresh foods. So, shelf-stable foods will be used. They'll help manage food safety and quality throughout the intended shelf life of the mission. They'll be compact, self-contained, and designed to reduce the risk of crumbs or particulates floating around in microgravity during the mission. After all, you don't want to end up inhaling breadcrumbs. NASA says Artemis 2 menus will reflect decades of advancement in space food systems. Back during the Apollo days, missions relied on early food technologies with limited variety, mostly paste in tubes. While space shuttle missions expanded the menu options and also the opportunity for onboard preparation. And the International Space Station benefits from regular resupply missions and occasional fresh foods. Now, in contrast, Artemis 2 uses a fixed pre-selection menu designed for a self-contained space vehicle with no resupply. Now, while that sounds pretty boring, the good news is the Artemis 2 crew have a direct input into the menu selection. In order to do that, they've been sampling, evaluating and rating all the foods on a standard menu during pre-flight testing, and their preferences are balanced with nutritional requirements and what Orion can accommodate. The final crew-specific menus are all set well before launch. 2 to 3 days worth of food for each crew member is packed together in a single container, providing flexibility for meal selection during the flight. Menus are tailored based on the spacecraft's food preparation capabilities during each phase of the mission. Certain foods, such as freeze-dried meals, require hydration using Orion's portable water dispenser, which is not available during some phases, including the launch and landing. As a result, foods selected for these phases need to be ready to eat and compatible with the spacecraft's operational constraints, while a broader range of food options are available once full food preparation systems are up and running. Bottom line, food aboard Orion will be ready to eat, rehydratable, thermostabilized, and irradiated. The crew uses Orion's portable water dispenser to rehydrate foods and beverages, and a compact briefcase-sized food warmer to heat meals as needed. This report from NASA TV.
Around the moon meal.
Around the moon meal. What would you eat? Cheese? You think?
Oh my gosh. That's clever. All right, describe.
My name is Christina Cook.
And I'm Jeremy Hansen. We're crew members on the Artemis 2 mission flying around the moon. And when we fly around the moon, of course, we're going to be taking some food with us.
That's right. This is how to eat in space. Here we are in what we call our food lab at NASA Johnson Space Center. We come in here quite often to sample space food. The neat thing about the food selection is it is so diverse. Different entrees that you wouldn't imagine can be rehydrated and actually good in space are completely fair game. And it's pretty awesome.
We came in for Artemis to do this. We got about halfway through the first session and we're like, we're not really sure we're gonna have time on board to warm this stuff up. We talked a lot about day one. It's a long day. It's hours before we even leave the launch pad on our way to space. And then when we get to space, we have a lot of important events that day. We just did a sim yesterday where lunch is scheduled. It's
midday meal.
Yeah, midday meal for all 4 of us. And so those would be great moments, I think, in our mission to have prepped some food and sit down or float as a crew and just have a joint meal.
For sure.
I think that'd be fun.
My name is Xulei Wu. I'm the food system manager for ISS and Artemis. The food lab at Johnson Space Center, that's where we make and package most of the space food, and also where we will be making all the food for the Artemis missions. Food is a big part for our crew members. They provide the nutrition, the calorie, micronutrient for crew members, but also boosting crew morale. It's very important. There is always a lot of steps, very strict steps for us to follow to making sure the food we provide are consistent and meet all the food safety, nutritional requirements, and most important, also need to taste good. The other strategy is always promote the variety, because everybody's food preference can be very different. Therefore, the more variety we can have, the better to meet the needs of the astronaut group.
They bring out these little tiny samples of each food, and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought we were having lunch. And then by the end, there's so many space foods, and every time you leave, you're like, I am so full.
I'm so full, I'm in pain.
And you just rate them like, I love this, I don't want to eat it, I'd eat it if you tell me I need it. Because what the food lab does is they take all your preferences, but they're also like good parents and they're like, you need a well-balanced diet.
Exactly. They were like, no, you can't have mac and cheese every day, Christina. Sorry.
I'm Wyeth McKinley. I'm a flight controller and a crew instructor for Artemis 2. We're here at the Space Vehicle Mock-Up Facility at Johnson Space Center. We're inside the Orion mock-up where we perform crew training for the Artemis 2 mission. On the Orion vehicle, crew is able to heat up their food using our briefcase-style food warmer. The food is held in contact with the central heater plate by these springs so they can warm up and they can have a delicious meal. Much of the food and drink that's on Orion is rehydratable. And so crew at our potable water dispenser will fill up their food and drink, and then at that point, you go ahead and pop it into your food warmer.
I'm kind of envisioning there's maybe one person putting the stuff in and out, kind of tossing it out to everyone as it's done. Or maybe if we're not scheduled together, you're just on your own over there, popping some things in. Or maybe just in your 2 minutes of free time between things, you're kind of getting it ready so it has time to warm up. We'll see.
Eating together really resonates with me. I think it's just a human thing to break bread together and to enjoy that necessary thing you have to do, the thing you should be grateful for. And so doing that as a group, as a family, has always been meaningful for me.
Absolutely. It represents togetherness and something a little out of the ordinary. You don't necessarily get to have those meals with everybody in your life, but if you are sharing a meal, especially if you're sharing breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a group of people, that means something. It's like a camping trip.
And in that report from NASA TV, we heard from Artemis 2 astronauts Christina Cook and Jeremy Hansen, Orion and Artemis Food Lab manager Ashia Ook, and NASA Artemis flight controller Wyatt McKinley. This is Space Time. And time now to take another brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with a science report. A new study warns that kids who eat more ultra-processed foods at age 3 are also more likely to have issues with their behaviour and emotions by the age of 5. The findings, reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association, looked into the diets of more than 2,000 kids and compared the amount of ultra-processed foods they ate with a rating system for child behaviour. They found that kids who consumed more ultra-processed foods scored worse for behavioural and emotional symptoms compared to kids who ate less. And kids who substituted in minimally processed foods had better outcomes with their behaviour and emotions. The earliest known relative of all primates, including humans, aren't monkeys, but a small mouse-sized mammal called Purgatorus. And now, scientists have found one of its tiny tooth fossils in a place that offers fresh clues on how primates evolved. A report in the journal Vertebrate Paleontology says the tiny tooth, which could easily be mistaken for a fleck of dust, was found further south in North America than previous fossils, suggesting these ancient primates originated in the north and then spread southwards, diversifying soon after the mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The authors say the discovery helps fill the gap in understanding the geography and evolution of our earliest primate relatives. There's new hope today for banana lovers who have been living under the sword of Damocles, with Panama disease continuing to threaten the globally popular Cavendish variety. A report in the journal Horticultural Research by Queensland University scientists has pinpointed crucial genetic resistance to a pathogen in a wild subspecies of the fruit. Panama disease is a destructive soil-borne fungus which impacts farmed Cavendish bananas worldwide through its virulent race 4 strains. The authors located the source of resistance on chromosome 5 in Calcutta 4, which is a highly fertile wild diploid banana, by crossing it with susceptible bananas from a different subspecies of the diploid banana group. Well, it's been a big week for Apple with its new budget-priced iPhone 17e and its MacBook Neo hitting the market. With the details, we're joined by technology editor Alex Hauer-Voigt from Tech Advice Start Life.
There's the iPhone 17e. I think we spoke about that in last week, and it's $999. It's got the latest A19 chip, obviously with one less core because it's the cheapest in the line. Last year's model, the 16e, came with 128 gig of storage, starting capacity. This year, 256. So same price, better chip, and double the storage. Can't go wrong. Now, there's a new iPad Air with the M4 chip. There's new Studio displays and the Studio Display XDR. These are professional displays. There's a new M5 Pro and M5 Max chips, which are inside the MacBook Pro with the Pro and the Max M5 chips. So super duper amazing chip. There's a new MacBook Air with M5 as well. I mean, people have been waiting for these new models to drop. But the big one that most people are going to talk about is the MacBook Neo. Neo also is a way of saying new. This comes in black color, a pink color, a yellow color, and like a silvery original MacBook color. And so 13-inch screen, there doesn't appear to be a notch at all, and 8 gig of RAM. And yeah, the storage, it's 256 gig to start with for $899. In the US, it's $599. So if you wanted the Touch ID button on the keyboard and you want to double the storage to 512 gig, well, incredibly, it's $1,099. Now, the MacBook Air does come with 16 gig of RAM as opposed to 8, and you can actually upgrade the Air and the Pros to even higher levels. But, you know, if people are just doing web browsing, social media, word processing, email, you know, Canva, a bit of word processing where you've got the Apple Intelligence to rewrite what you've said into a more professional tone or a friendly tone or a formal tone or whatever it is. Look, this is obviously more expensive at $899 than your sub $500 Chromebooks, which are okay because Chromebooks are not very heavy on top of the, they don't use much of the operating system's power. So if you have a less powerful one, under $500, it's okay. But try running a Windows device at that price, and you're talking about awful processors, the Celeron or the Pentium or just, nonsense processors that are not the Core i3, i5, and i7. And of course, there's nothing with the i3 to write home about, but the i5 and the i7 and the new Core Ultra 5s and 7s and 9s and all that sort of stuff, those are much more powerful. Now, this Apple MacBook Neo does have the A18 Pro chip, so it's not one of the M series chips, and it's not even the newest chip, the A19, it's the A18. But this has been shown by Apple's benchmarks to have more than enough power to do all these desktop things, to run the desktop apps, and also can run various iPad and iPhone apps that the developers share. So this should see a resurgence in people buying Macs for their kids, for themselves.
That's Alex Zaharov-Reutt from TechAdvice.life, and this is Space Time. That's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from SpaceTimeWithStuartGarry.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to SpaceTimeWithStuartGarry.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.